Before we begin, take a moment to breathe. Wherever you are, whether you're curled up in bed with your headphones on, driving through an empty stretch of road, or just killing time between the chaos of the day, I want to welcome you back to a space where the water runs deep and darker than you might think. Tonight's stories aren't just horror, they're the kind that slip beneath your skin. Stories that tap into something quieter, more familiar. A public pool you passed every summer. A childhood memory of floating under a sky that suddenly felt too big. A splash where there should be silence. This isn't the kind of fear that jumps out at you. This is the kind that lingers, that watches from the deep end when you think you're alone. Some say water remembers that it holds emotion, that it stores echoes of the past, and that when the night is quiet enough, when the surface is still enough, it whispers back. So wherever you are, I suggest you keep the lights on, or maybe if you're brave enough, turn them off. Let the stillness wrap around you. You'll hear tales of quiet drownings, of figures that drift where no one should be of footsteps by the pool when the gates are locked. And each one is based on the kinds of moments people swear really happened, moments that leave no physical mark but never quite leave your memory. This isn't just about haunted water, it's about the fear that sinks. So let's begin with the first story. And remember, hold your breath. Story 1. The Sixth Swimmer. I started working the night shift at the Lane Aquatic Center in Eugene last spring. The place is older than it looks from the outside. Built in 1962, renovated sometime in the 90s. But most of the original infrastructure is still intact, especially the cameras. The management never upgraded them. We had this clunky analog monitor in the security room with split screens showing the pool from multiple angles. No sound, no playback, just grainy black and white surveillance footage. It was my third week on the job when I first noticed it. That night, 6 swimmers were visible on the cameras spread out across the pool doing laps, but only 5 names had signed the logbook. I remember double checking it 3 times. 5 people, not 6. At first, I figured someone had slipped in without signing. Happens sometimes, especially with members who think they're above the rules. But when I went to the edge of the pool to count them in person, I only saw 5. I blinked. Checked the cameras again. 6. I looked up at the pool. 5. Looked down again. 6. It gave me this crawling feeling at the back of my neck, that uncanny cold shiver kind of chill, but I brushed it off. I mean, the camera's quality was garbage, maybe some kind of reflection or a glitch. Still, I started keeping track. Each night that week, the same thing happened. 5 people in real life, 6 on the screen. The extra swimmer was always in lane 3. Always I tried to zoom in, but the controls were garbage. The image got blurrier the closer I looked. What I could make out was that the 6th figure never left lane 3. Never rested at the wall, just swam. Slow, steady strokes. No variation. I never saw their face. Their movements were fluid but stiff, like they were dragging themselves forward more than gliding. I started getting anxious. I didn't tell anyone yet, just logged the entries carefully. The weirdest night came when the pool was empty, completely closed. A thunderstorm had knocked out power earlier that day, and management shut down operations to check for electrical hazards. No swimmers, no lifeguards, just me. And yet on the monitor lane, 3 showed ripples, a figure moving through the water. It was unmistakable. I froze. My breath caught. I thought maybe it was old footage, some error causing a recording to loop, but then the screen flickered and jumped to live feed from the main entrance where I could see myself staring at the monitor in real time. That was when I knew I wasn't imagining things. I ran to the pool deck. Lane 3 was calm, still no sign of anyone. But when I leaned over the water, the air felt colder, denser. I remember the way it smelled like wet copper and mildew, and there was a single wet footprint on the tiles. Just one leading nowhere. I took photos. I still have them, but of course they don't show much. The footprint faded quickly. The camera, when I returned to the booth, now showed an empty pool. Whatever was there, it had gone. For a while, the next week, swimmers started making comments. Nothing too strange at first. One said it felt like someone brushed past them underwater. Another said she kept losing count of her laps, always coming up one short like she'd been pacing someone who wasn't there. A kid even said, "That man in lane 3 swims weird." But lane 3 was empty when his mom checked. I finally broke and brought it up to my supervisor. He laughed at first, told me there was an old urban legend about a swimmer who drowned in lane 3 during a meet back in the 80s. Said the guy had a seizure mid-race and went under. Lifeguards didn't spot him for nearly 3 minutes. He was dead before they pulled him out. They say he used to swim like a machine. Same rhythm, same pace, never broke form. He was in lane 3 when he died. My supervisor said it like it was a joke, but his eyes didn't smile. I think he knew. That weekend I tried a test. I set my phone to record the monitors while I did a walkthrough of the pool deck. Empty. When I came back, lane 3 had activity again. My phone showed the same shape, same strokes. No face, just arms breaking the water in perfect robotic motion. I uploaded the footage privately and showed a friend who works in video editing. He said it looked too real to be faked, but maybe it was a trick of exposure or double feed. He suggested replacing the cameras, but I couldn't, I wanted to know more. One night curiosity got the better of me. I brought my own swimsuit, waited until closing, all lights out, no one around. I dove into lane 3. The water felt thicker, colder than the others. I started to swim. 10 strokes, 20, 30, and then I felt it. A hand. It brushed the side of my ribs, not grabbing, just skimming. I froze, kicked upward, gasping for air, but the lane above me was empty, yet the water kept moving. I swear to God, something passed beneath me, deeper than the floor should allow. I climbed out, heart racing, vision, tunneling. Never again. I asked to be moved today. Shifts the following week. Management agreed without question. They've had others request the same thing before. No one ever lasts long on the night shift, but the cameras are still running, and I still check them. Sometimes. Lane 3 never stays still for long, even when the pool is locked. Even when no one is inside, there's always a sixth swimmer. Some stories haunt you with what they show, others with what they never explain. But sometimes the most terrifying things don't live in the water at all. They wait just outside your window, quiet, persistent staring. Story 2. Poolside Room 213. I was just looking for a cheap getaway when I booked the Beacon Shore Motel in Atlantic City. It was the kind of place you find on page 4 of a travel site. Faded photos, mixed reviews, questionable carpet. But it was right near the boardwalk and had a pool, and that was enough for me. I arrived on a Thursday mid-September, so the crowds were gone and the ocean air was thick with that salty, empty amusement park kind of stillness. The receptionist was an old man with a wheezy voice who barely looked up when I checked in. He handed me a key, an actual key, not a card, and said, "Room 213, faces the pool. Don't open the curtains after dark." He said it so casually I almost missed it. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He didn't laugh back. Room 213 was exactly what I expected. Thin walls, floral bed sheets, air conditioner that sounded like a dying raccoon. The window looked straight out at the pool. A big rectangular basin surrounded by cracked tiles and broken deck chairs. But something was off. The water was too still. No movement, no leaves, no reflection. It was like the water absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Around the pool was a high fence with a rusted chain and padlock. A faded sign read, "Closed. Indefinitely. Do not enter." I didn't think much of it until that night. I had the TV on some late-night news show mumbling in the background when I heard the splash. Clear, loud. Like someone had cannonballed into the deep end, I paused. Waited. Then another splash. I walked to the window and peeked out between the curtains. The pool was still. Nothing moved. No ripples. No people. I opened the curtain wider. Nothing. Just the dark rectangle of water, the cracked cement, and a faint shimmer under the motel floodlight. Then I saw it. A ripple dead center of the pool. One circle. Then another. Like something just beneath the surface was breathing. I closed the curtain fast. Maybe too fast. The metal rings clinked loudly, and that somehow made me feel like I'd alerted something. That's when I remembered what the guy at the front desk said. Don't open the curtains after dark. I tried to go to sleep. I really did. But around 2:30 a.m. I woke up needing water. I walked past the window to get to the sink, and my eyes, like they had minds of their own, glanced through a gap in the curtain. There was someone standing at the edge of the pool. Not moving. Just standing. Pale skin. No shirt. Dark trunks. I couldn't see their face, but I knew they were looking at my window. My stomach dropped. I stepped back. He'd waited. After a minute or two, I looked again. The figure was gone. The pool still, but one of the deck chairs was overturned now. I hadn't noticed that earlier. I left the curtains closed the rest of the night and barely slept. The next morning, I asked the receptionist about the pool. He said, "We haven't used that pool since '09. I asked why he stared at me for a long time. Then said, "Someone drowned. Girl 12 years old. No one knows how daylight lifeguard on duty, other people in the pool. 1 second she was floating, the next she was gone. They found her 20 minutes later, but they never saw her go under." I asked if that's why he told me not to open the curtains. He just nodded. I should have left that day, but I didn't. I thought I was being silly, letting a creepy story get into my head. That night, I couldn't resist. I cracked the curtain just a bit, just enough to see. The water was rippling again, gently, like someone was moving in slow circles beneath the surface. Then I saw a shadow. It looked like a girl. Hair fanned out, eyes wide. She was under the water, but staring straight up at me. I shut the curtain, heart pounding, and stepped back, tripping over the edge of the bed. I hit the floor hard, and for a second I swore I heard knocking. Not on the door, on the window. Just a soft, rhythmic tap. Tap, tap, tap. I waited, holding my breath, then scrambled up and turned on every light in the room. I didn't sleep at all. Around 5 a.m., I opened the curtain fully. The pool was still, again, empty. But on the glass of my window, there were streaks. Water. Streaks. Like someone with wet hands had pressed against it. 2 small handprints. I checked out early. I told the front desk guy what happened. He just nodded like he'd heard it all before. Before I left, I asked, "Does room 213 always face the pool?" He looked confused. "There's no 213, he said. "We don't use that number. Last room on the second floor is 212. I told him I had a key. Showed him. He looked pale. Took the key and checked something in a drawer. This was retired years ago. We had that room sealed. After what happened in there, I didn't wait to hear the rest. I got in my car and drove straight out of Atlantic City. I don't know where I slept that night, maybe some roadside motel. I don't remember, but I haven't been near a pool since rooms can forget. Pools can be drained, but dreams hold on longer. And when they return, especially to the minds of children, they carry things no one else can see. Story 3. Chlorine dreams. When my little brother started waking up soaked every night, the camp nurses thought it was just bedwetting. They said it was normal that some kids regressed when away from home, and he was only 8 after all. But I knew my brother. I knew something was wrong. Camp Arroyo had been our parents' idea, a desert escape from the screens and smog and stress. 2 weeks under the sun, with group hikes, archery, and a massive outdoor pool built right into the sandstone. I was 13 and more annoyed than excited, but my brother Mikey was thrilled about the pool. It was the first thing he asked about when we arrived, and the last thing he talked about before bed that first night. The weirdness started 3 days in. Mikey began sleepwalking, not just around the cabin, but out the door. I woke up around 3 a.m. and found him standing barefoot in the dirt, eyes half open, mumbling something about someone waiting for him. I grabbed his arm and led him back inside, thinking it was just a one-time thing. But it happened again the next night and the next. Every time he was headed in the same direction, straight toward the pool. The counselors brushed it off, said some kids just had restless minds. But I saw the look in Mikey's eyes when I tried to talk to him about it the next morning. He didn't remember leaving the cabin, but he kept describing dreams about being underwater, except it wasn't scary. He said it felt like he belonged there, like he was visiting friends. I told the camp nurse, and she said to monitor him and maybe keep a journal of his episodes. I started doing that, noting every time he left the cabin, and every time he talked in his sleep, I started sleeping with one shoe on, just in case I had to chase after him again. Then came the night I followed him all the way. I waited until he slipped out of his bunk, then gave him a minute before trailing behind, silent in the dark. The desert air was cool, but the ground still held heat from the day, and I could hear the crunch of Mikey's footsteps on the gravel path ahead. The pool area was fenced off at night, but the gate had a broken latch. Mikey walked right through it. The pool water was still glowing faintly from the underwater lights, a sickly green-blue hue that made the steam rising from the surface look like fog. He stepped up to the edge and stood there just staring. I whispered his name. No response. He was sleepwalking still. I crept closer, then stopped when he lifted one foot and stepped into the pool fully clothed. He didn't splash. He just walked in slowly, sinking deeper and deeper until the water closed over his head. I ran and jumped in after him, and for a second the world went silent beneath the surface. I reached out, grabbed his wrist, and pulled hard. His body was limp but not stiff. Like he wasn't drowning, just not resisting. I hauled him to the surface, gasping, dragging him to the shallow end where I could stand. He coughed, once blinked at me and said the name Haley. I asked who that was, but he just blinked again and said, "She misses me." I wrapped him in a towel and sat with him for an hour before the staff came looking. We got a warning for sneaking out, but no one pressed too hard. Mikey seemed fine the next day, cheerful, even like nothing had happened. But he kept talking about Haley, about how she was lonely and how the water felt like home. I did some digging with one of the counselors who had been at the camp for years. I asked about any accidents or drownings. He got quiet. Said there was an incident back in the late 90s. A camper named Haley went missing during a swim lesson. They never found her body, just her towel folded neatly by the edge of the pool. They closed camp that year and drained the pool, but nothing turned up. They figured she ran away or got lost in the desert, but nobody really believed that. After hearing that, I checked the camp archives in the main lodge late at night. I found an old newsletter mentioning Haley Stevens, age 9, disappeared. June 14th, 1998, favorite activity swimming. My stomach twisted. That date was exactly 25 years ago from the night Mikey walked into the water. I confronted him, gently asked if Haley told him anything. He said, "She wanted someone to stay with her. She was tired of being alone and the others were too quiet." Now I asked what others, but he didn't answer, just stared out the window toward the pool. The next night I stayed awake again. Mikey didn't move, but I heard splashing. I looked out the cabin window and saw ripples in the water, even though no one was there. The pool gate was swinging slowly back and forth. I never reported that one. I knew they wouldn't believe me. On the final night of camp, Mikey woke up screaming, not walking, not mumbling, but screaming. Said they were trying to pull him down. Said Haley was angry that he didn't keep his promise. He cried for hours and begged to leave early. We packed up before sunrise and our parents came to get us the next morning. Mikey never went near a pool again, not even bathtubs. He took showers only and always with the door cracked open. As for me, I still dream of that water, of the pale shapes moving just under the surface and the way it smelled like bleach and old rain. I looked up the records years later and found a photo of Haley Stevens. She looked just like Mikey described her. Short, dark hair, missing front tooth, bright pink swimsuit. I sometimes wonder if Mikey was the first she reached out to, or just the first who came back. I think the water remembers every soul it takes, and I think sometimes it wants company. Not every haunting needs history. Sometimes it only takes silence, isolation, and a single ripple to open something old, something buried, something waiting underneath. Story 4. Underneath. When we bought the cabin outside Asheville, it felt like a dream. The place was tucked into the mountains with wraparound decks, a sloped yard, and a private pool cut into the hillside. My wife Tara was thrilled. She always wanted a place with water, something quiet and personal to float in after long work days. The cabin was old but sturdy. The pool had moss along the edges, and the filter system looked like it had not been touched since the 90s, but we hired a local company to clean it up. They drained, scrubbed, refilled, and by the end of the first week it looked brand new. Our first night sleeping in the cabin was uneventful, but the second night I woke up to a sound. It was faint, almost like a child crying, but distant and muffled. Tara was still asleep. I went to the sliding glass door that overlooked the backyard and pool and stood there listening. The crying stopped, but the water was rippling like someone had just climbed out. The next morning I mentioned it. Tara laughed and said it was probably a raccoon or a deer or maybe even the wind. I agreed mostly because I wanted to believe that too. But the next night it happened again. Same sound. Same time around 2 a.m. And this time I swore. I saw something move just beneath the surface. Not big, not fast, just a slow drifting shape like long hair spreading out underwater. I started staying up later each night watching the pool from inside the house. The camera on my phone was useless in the dark, and motion lights never triggered, but the ripples always came and always around. 2 a.m. One night I stepped outside, barefoot, stood on the cold concrete and watched. I whispered into the air, asking if anyone was out there. It was stupid, but it felt right to try. The ripple stopped immediately, and the air got colder. I went back inside and locked the door. That was the first night Tara said she had a nightmare. She said she dreamed of drowning, but it was not violent. Just peaceful, like something warm and gentle was pulling her under. That detail bothered me more than I admitted. A week later, I found something at the bottom of the pool. A small silver locket caked in algae but still intact. I opened it inside and found a photo inside of a young girl, maybe 8 or 9, smiling with front teeth missing. Her hair was dark and wet, and the picture looked aged by water and time. I showed it to Tara, and she turned pale. She said she had seen that face in her dreams. I buried the locket in the yard that night, feeling dumb and scared all at once. But the crying got louder after that, the sound closer. Now more urgent, and Tara started sleepwalking. I woke up one night and she was gone. I found her standing at the edge of the pool, her nightgown soaked to the knees, her feet bare. Her eyes were open but distant, and she was humming something I had never heard before. When I touched her shoulder, she screamed and almost fell into the water. The next morning, she had no memory. I told her we should drain the pool. She refused, said we were imagining things, said we were tired from the move and overworked. I told her I heard something down there, something crying every night. She said that was impossible. But that night we both heard it, and she finally admitted she was scared. We decided to leave for a few days, take a trip into town, stay at a hotel, clear our heads. The night before we left, I could not sleep. I sat on the deck alone, listening to the water. I looked at the surface and saw it moving again. Not with the wind, but like something was circling just under the surface. Something was waiting. I went inside, packed our bags, and set the alarm for morning. But when I woke up, Tara was gone again. I ran to the backyard and found the pool, calm, empty. But her slippers were beside it, neatly placed on the edge, and her robe was floating in the water. I jumped in, swam to the bottom, and found nothing. No Tara, no locket, no sign of struggle. Just silence. I called the police. They searched for days. Drones, dogs, divers. No body ever found. The story ran in local papers, but no one had answers. They thought she ran. They called it grief or mental illness. They were wrong. I stayed at a hotel in town for weeks, refusing to return. But the dreams came anyway. Dreams of Tara, humming. Dreams of her face pressed against glass. Underwater eyes, wide mouth, moving like she was trying to speak. I went back to the cabin one last time to sell it. I drained the pool myself, using old pumps and hoses. The water lowered inch by inch until the bottom was exposed, and when it was, I saw it. Something carved into the tile. A name. Helena June, 3rd, 1974. And below it, the words, "She lives underneath." No one ever mentioned that during the inspection. No one mentioned a girl drowning here in the 70s, but I know now that she never left, and I think Tara's with her now. Sometimes I still hear her humming when I close my eyes. Sometimes I see ripples and puddles when no one is near. I never swim anymore. Some swimmers fear drowning, others fear the deep end. But what if the true danger is what waits at the very bottom, where light stops, and depth becomes something else entirely? Story 5. Depth 11. The pool at the Halverson Performance Center was one of the best in the state. Olympic length, pristine tile digital timing systems, and strict access control. I had been swimming there for 3 years as part of the Elite Adult Training League. Lane 4 was always mine, not officially, but every coach knew it. I trained there every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Same warm-up, same routine, same mental rhythm. I prided myself on precision, but 3 months ago, something changed. It started with a drag. Not fatigue, not cramps, not form, a pull. Like something beneath me was resisting my stroke, like I was swimming through thicker water than the rest. I mentioned it to the pool director, some guy named Cliff, and he just smiled and said, "I must be hitting a dead zone in the current." But this was a still water pool. No jets, no filters running during sessions. I let it go. until the second week. I was mid-set pushing hard against the clock when I felt it again. That drag. But this time it was specific. It grabbed at my ankle just enough to break my kick, just enough to make me swallow water. I surfaced and looked down the lane. Nothing. No other swimmers near. Just the pale blue lane markers rippling in the artificial light. I didn't say anything that day, but after practice I walked over to the maintenance office and asked how deep the pool was. The guy looked at a chart on the wall and said it was a standard depth of 7 feet across. Even floor, no slope. I nodded, thanked him, and left. But something didn't sit right. The next week I brought a dive watch. After practice, when the pool was mostly empty, I swam. To lane 4, exhaled and dove straight down. The moment I passed the 5-foot mark, the water pressure shifted. It felt unnatural, like I had passed through a membrane. My watch ticked 8 feet. 9. Then 10. I hit the floor at 11 feet. It wasn't level. It sloped downward just in lane 4. The tiles were the same but newer. The grout was darker, like someone had replaced the flooring in this lane and hoped no one would notice. When I surfaced, I was breathing hard. Not from effort, but from confusion. I dried off and went back to the front desk, asked for Cliff. He was gone for the day. I came back the next morning and asked again. The new shift said they didn't have anyone named Cliff on staff. I asked about the pool dimensions. They pulled out a laminated diagram, 7 feet flat uniform. No mention of a deeper section. I knew then I wouldn't get answers from them. I waited until the weekend when the facility was closed for cleaning. I had a friend who worked night security, and he let me in through the back. I walked the edge of lane 4 with a flashlight. Nothing obvious, but when I leaned in and stared down, I could see it. The depth. Slight, but real. 11 feet centered exactly between the backstroke flags. I dove again. This time with my GoPro strapped to my head, I recorded the whole thing. Down touch up. But when I played back the footage at home, it glitched. Right. At the 10-foot mark, static lines, screen warping. Then for 3 seconds, the audio picked up something. Not bubbles, not water. A voice. Garbled low like it was coming through from another room. I enhanced it in editing software, raised the levels, filtered the noise. It repeated the same phrase. Stay down. I tried again, the next week with a new camera. Same thing. Video glitched, voice returned. This time it said, keep going. I should have stopped, but instead I obsessed. I stopped swimming laps and focused only on that lane. On that spot, I began to dive at night alone, over and over. Once I tried to dig into the floor with a crowbar, I smuggled in under a towel. I chipped a corner. Beneath the tile was metal, not concrete. Smooth, dull, seamless metal like a panel. I recorded it. Sent it to a friend who used to work in structural engineering. He said it looked like part of a hatch. I asked him if it made sense to have something like that under a public pool. He went silent and then told me to stop. That night I dove again. Touched the hatch. Stayed longer. I had a weight belt and extra air in my lungs. When I hit the panel it felt warm, vibrating slightly, and then I heard it again. Not in the audio. In my head. Closer. Clearer. Just 3 words. Come with me. I shot up fast. Heart pounding, ears ringing. My nose bled all over the water I left without showering. That was the last night I swam there. I never reported it. Never showed the video to anyone else, but I still have the file. When I open it now, the glitch is worse. The footage loops the last 10 seconds over and over. My hand reaching toward the hatch. My hand freezing. The audio repeats a low whisper that has changed. The voice no longer says, "Come with me." Now it just says, almost yours. I moved across the state and cut contact with the league. They sent me emails, asked why I dropped out. I never replied. I joined a new gym. No pool, just weights and treadmills. And yet sometimes when I take a shower, the drain gurgles differently, like something is trying to rise through it. The water in my sink sometimes pools slow, like something is holding it back. I do not swim anymore. I do not look into still water, and I never ever count lanes. But not all pools are public. Some are quiet, sterile, lit by artificial light and guarded by no one. And sometimes that is when something decides to rise. Story 6. The closing shift. I used to work night shifts at a 24-hour fitness center on the edge of Omaha. Most of the job was cleaning, resetting equipment, folding towels. But the pool area was always my last stop. It was supposed to close at midnight and reopen at 5, but employees had keys. We kept it clean, checked for lost items, turned off the deck lights. The pool itself had a stillness I never liked. Something about chlorinated water under dim blue lights just felt wrong after hours. At night, the echo was different. Footsteps bounced back sharper, water sloshed without being touched. On my second week of closing solo, I started noticing things. The first was the music. It was faint like elevator music, but underwater. I would walk past the pool and stop, because I could swear I heard piano notes. The speakers were off. There were no sources of music in that room. I thought maybe it was my imagination. Maybe my headphones had leaked sound into my memory. But then one night I stayed still long enough to listen, and the music changed. It became slower, not melody, just tones. Long droning chords under the surface. I asked my supervisor, and he said, the place used to have underwater speakers back in the 80s. He laughed and said, maybe they still worked. The wiring was never fully removed. I let it go, but then came the second thing. The figure. I was wiping down the glass wall between the gym and the pool. The lights were dimmed, but the pool had this glow from below, that bluish haze that makes everything look dreamlike. And as I cleaned, I looked up and saw someone floating on their back, just drifting, arms out, no movement, pale skin, dark hair. I froze. No one was supposed to be in there. I ran to the entrance, fumbled with my keys, got the door open. The water was empty, perfectly still. No ripples, no wet footprints. Just me and that chlorine air that always smelled like bleach and something sour. I stood there longer than I want to admit. Then I closed the door and finished my shift. The next night, I brought my phone and took pictures every hour, documented the emptiness. Just to prove to myself it was fine. Nothing unusual. But at 2 a.m. on the security camera feed, I saw it again. A shape, not on the water, underneath it, parallel to the floor. As if someone was floating just below the surface without moving, I rushed out again. Nothing. The feed was live, but nothing was there. The camera kept rolling, and that image stayed for hours. That same shape, not moving. I pulled the plug on the camera, reset the system. When it came back online, the feed was normal again, but I knew I had seen it. I started talking to the morning crew, asked if anyone had ever felt weird in the pool room. One guy said he always felt like someone was watching from the deep end. Another said the water made her skin itch in a way that normal chlorine never did. One janitor just said, stay out after midnight, and never explained. A week later, I decided to stay late. After my shift ended at 4, I locked the doors and sat on one of the benches near the pool. I kept the lights low. I watched. At 4:20, I saw movement, a ripple in the center. No source, just movement. Then a hand, pale rising slowly from beneath as if reaching for the ceiling. It stayed above water for a full minute, still not dripping. Then it sank back down without a splash. I did not move. I did not speak. I waited for the sun. I left my job the next morning, did not give notice, did not go back for my last paycheck. That was 4 years ago. Last week I got a package in the mail, no return address. Inside was a photo, printed on cheap glossy paper. It was grainy but clear enough. A pool, empty deck, dim lights, and in the center the shape, floating just beneath the surface. A shape with long arms and open hands and a face turned upward. I turned the photo over. There were no words, just a wet fingerprint on the back. I do not know who sent it. I do not want to know. But I started sleeping with the lights on again. Sometimes I dream of blue water, and sometimes the music returns, low and slow and always beneath me. And while night shifts blur the line between exhaustion and hallucination, what about places meant for joy, for laughter, for families? What happens when the echo of tragedy refuses to leave? Story 7. The Boy with the Red Floaties. It was supposed to be a normal vacation. Just me, my wife, and our daughter Julia. 3 nights at a beachside resort in Daytona. A little break before school started. The kind of trip where you sit by the pool with plastic cups of soda and forget what month it is. The resort was built in the 70s, but the reviews were decent. Clean rooms, private beach, family friendly. The pool was the main selling point. Olympic size with a shallow end for kids and a curved slide that Julia begged to go down before we even unpacked. Our first 2 days were perfect. Julia played with a group of kids her age, all splashing and racing and inventing games about sharks and treasure. I remember sitting on the edge with my legs in the water, sunburn in my knees, thinking this was the kind of moment you were supposed to remember forever. That was the day I first saw the boy. He was standing by the diving board in the deep end, apart from the other kids. His skin was pale, like he had not been in the sun at all. His swim trunks were too big, almost falling off his waist. But the thing that stood out most were the floaties. Bright red, cartoonish, wrapped tightly around both arms. He looked about 6. He was just watching, not moving. I nudged my wife and pointed, but when she turned to look, he was gone. I scanned the pool. No splash, no movement. He had just vanished. Later that night, I asked Julia if she saw the boy with the red floaties. She shook her head. I described him again. She said maybe he was with another family, but she had not seen anyone like that. I let it go. Figured he was some local kid who wandered in, but the next morning he was there again. Same spot by the diving board, same floaties, same stillness. This time I watched him for nearly 5 minutes. He never blinked, never looked away, just stared at the water like he was waiting for something. I stood up, walked around the pool to talk to him, but halfway there a lifeguard blew a whistle and turned my attention toward a kid who slipped on the wet tiles. When I looked back, the boy was gone again. That night, Julia had trouble sleeping. She said she had a weird dream about drowning. Not herself, but someone else. A little boy floating face down. I asked what he looked like. She just said his arms were red. I tried to sleep, but the image kept coming back. The floaties, the pale skin, the way he never moved. On our last day, I decided to ask the front desk if they knew anything. A woman named Debbie was on duty. I mentioned a boy with red floaties who seemed to appear and disappear. She stopped typing and looked up slowly, said she had heard something like that before. She lowered her voice and told me that 15 years ago, a boy named Joey had drowned in the deep end. No one noticed until the lifeguard rotation changed, and someone spotted his body near the drain. He had been wearing red floaties. They were supposed to keep him safe. They did not. The hotel had done its best to keep the story quiet. Settled with the family, renovated the pool, repainted everything, but some guests still claimed to see him, always watching, always quiet. I asked her why he was always alone. She said some stories, said he had been pushed. Others said he just slipped. No one ever knew for sure. I walked back to our room in a fog. Julia was already in her swimsuit, begging to swim one last time before we checked out. My wife was packing. I told myself it was fine, that I was being paranoid. We went down to the pool, sun shining, music playing, kids laughing. It all felt normal, but I could not stop scanning the water. Looking for a flash of red, I told Julia to stay in the shallow end. She agreed. 10 minutes later, I saw her climbing out of the deep end, coughing and rubbing her eyes. I rushed over, wrapped her in a towel, asked what happened. She said she was swimming near the middle when someone grabbed her ankle and pulled. She said she saw a boy under her. Not swimming, just looking up, arms out. Red floaties. I picked her up and walked straight to our room. We checked out early. I did not sleep that night. I kept seeing that look in her eyes. The confusion, the fear, the truth. A week after we got home, a package arrived. No return label. Inside was a pair of red floaties, worn faded, still damp. I threw them in the trash and blocked the memory. At least I tried. Julia stopped swimming after that. Said she did not like how pools made her feel. Said they made her cold even in summer. My wife and I never spoke about it again. We booked vacations without water, without chlorine, without deep ends. But sometimes when I hear water running, I still see him, just standing there by the edge. Even when we leave the water behind, it follows, not physically, but in our minds. In flashes, in memories we swear are not ours. What if they never were? Story 8. Water memory. When I checked into the Bellevue Rehabilitation Center in Rochester, it was supposed to be for a 2-week reset. I was not a danger to myself, but I was close. I had stopped sleeping, stopped eating. Had these episodes where I would black out for a few seconds and wake up shaking. I told the intake nurse that I needed space from the world. She said I had come to the right place. Bellevue was a converted mansion from the 40s turned into a mental health retreat. Private rooms, communal therapy, good food, and most notably a heated indoor pool. I never liked water much, but the doctor said aquatic therapy would help with body memory, help reset the nervous system. My second day, they scheduled me for a solo swim session. The pool was in the basement, down 2 flights of stairs and behind a heavy locked door. The air was always warm and thick with chlorine. The tiles had a retro checker pattern and the lights buzzed softly under the ceiling panels. I eased into the water, thinking about nothing, trying to focus on my breath, on the way my body felt suspended. But around the 6th lap, something strange happened. I had a memory. It was not mine. It was too vivid, too sharp. I was walking through a house with red walls, framed photos of people I had never met. A radio was playing a jazz tune I could not name. I blinked, and I was back in the pool, hands gripping the wall, breath shallow. I told the therapist about it. She said sometimes sensory therapy unlocked deep associations. Maybe it was from a movie or a forgotten dream. I nodded, but I knew better. The next time it happened, I was underwater, fully submerged, when I saw a flash of a woman standing by a window. She was crying and holding something small, a bundle, a baby. Her lips moved, but I could not hear her words. I felt an overwhelming grief, like I had lost something too precious to name. I surfaced, coughing. That night, I could not sleep. I started writing the memories down. They came faster each time I entered the pool. A man digging in snow with bare hands screaming into the wind. A door closing softly behind a child. A hallway filled with peeling wallpaper and a dog barking somewhere in the distance. These were not mine. I knew it with certainty. One morning during group therapy, a patient named Alan stared at me the whole session. Afterward, he approached and asked if I had ever been to Elm Street in Henrietta. I said no. He said I had described his childhood home in perfect detail during the session. I told him I had not spoken a word in group that day. He looked shaken, said he could hear it clear as day. My voice describing the red swing, the chipped porch, the number on the mailbox. I asked the nurses if there had been any reports of patients sharing delusions. They said no. I asked to stop the aquatic sessions. They said I was making progress, that my writing had become clearer, that my anxiety had lessened. I did not feel better. I felt invaded. I decided to test it. I brought a waterproof notebook and a pencil into the pool, hid it under a towel until the staff left. I slipped into the water and floated until the visions came. I wrote as fast as I could. A name kept repeating. Mary Ann H. Foster, born August 3rd, 1961. I wrote it down 3 times. When I got back to my room, I searched the name online. Nothing at first. Then I added Rochester to the search. A news archive came up from 1983. Mary Ann Foster missing, presumed drowned at age 22. Last seen at a community pool in Irondequoit. No body ever recovered. The photo matched one of the faces I had seen. A pale woman with long hair eyes, distant like she was already halfway gone. I showed the article to my caseworker. She told me to stop reading old tragedies. She said it was easy to get fixated while in treatment. I told her I saw Mary Ann. I felt her grief, her fear, her last breath. She said I needed rest. I knew I needed answers. That night, I snuck back to the pool, used a stolen key fob from the janitor. I stepped into the water, fully clothed, and let myself sink. I counted the seconds, waited for the visions, but they did not come. Instead, I felt something brush my hand. Fingers cold and thin. They closed around my wrist, not pulling, not hurting, just holding. I looked down and saw a face. Not fully formed, not skin and bone, more like memory made real. Her mouth moved. She said the word, "Listen." Then she vanished. I climbed out, shaking clothes, soaked shoes, heavy. I returned to my room, left the facility the next morning against medical advice. I could not stay there. Not with her in the water. The memories did not stop. They come now in dreams and reflections in the spaces between words. When someone says pool or chlorine or float, I hear her voice low and clear. "Listen," she says. And then she shows me another life. A boy alone on a rooftop. A woman tearing up a letter. An old man staring into the sky as if waiting for something that never came. I write them all down. I do not swim anymore. I do not bathe for more than 5 minutes. I shower with the door open and the drain unplugged, but the water still finds me. It whispers names and stories and places I should not know. I think some memories do not belong to us. I think they drift waiting for a vessel. And I think I have become one. There's something about water. It looks so harmless. Still reflective. Almost inviting. But beneath the surface, things change. Depth becomes distance. Distance becomes isolation, and silence becomes something else entirely. What these stories remind us is that fear doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it waits. Quiet. Patient settling in like cold water over your skin. Each tale we heard tonight carried the same thread, a warning. not always about ghosts. Sometimes about being unseen or ignored or left behind. Sometimes the horror isn't what's in the water, it's the people who never notice someone sinking. And sometimes the scariest part isn't what happened, it's what no one remembers happening. You don't need a haunted pool to feel dread. Sometimes it's enough to recall a sound you couldn't explain, a shadow that vanished too fast, a face you swore you saw, floating just beneath the surface. So maybe next time you walk by a pool after dark, or hear dripping in a silent locker room, or see ripples in water you didn't touch, pause, just for a second. Not because you believe in ghosts, but because you know deep down that water holds things, memories, grief, secrets. And if we're not careful, maybe even us. Stay aware, stay safe, and always know who's swimming beside you, because in the stories we tell, and sometimes in the ones we live, someone is always watching from the deep,